Well, how about starting on time for a change? It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the morning, Professor Girish Agarwal from Oklahoma State University, who will talk to us about engineering coherence and entanglement via photon addition and subtraction. I found a name tag on the road. Swarnamala Sisvi. If you've lost your name tag, it's here. It's torn, so you won't be able to hold it anymore. Anyways, without further ado, let's welcome Girish.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here at this conference. I like to thank my old friend and collaborator over many years, Simon and Gilles, for the kind invitation to speak at this conference. For some years, I and my collaborators have been looking into how one can produce a wider class of states with quantum mechanical properties using the technique of photon subtraction and photon addition. This way we can produce a whole class of non-Gaussian states, and this field got a big boost once Marco Bellini in 2004 demonstrated experimentally how to do photon addition and subtraction. In fact, Marco Bellini showed experimentally that he can generate classes of states with quantum mechanical properties starting from completely classical states. Since the experimental work of Bellini, many other experimental groups have started producing quantum states using the technique of photon addition and subtraction. So I like to describe to you some of these developments and possibly give you some application of these non-Gaussian states. So let me explain first how the process of photon addition and subtraction works. The workhorse in our field is the process of parametric down conversion. And so what you do here, you have a nonlinear crystal here which has a second order nonlinearity. This crystal is being pumped by an intense beam of light, and on using the second order nonlinearities of this crystal like BBO, you produce a pair of photons starting from each photon of the pump. So each photon of the pump is converted into two photons, which typically are called signal and the idler photons. So now if you think of an experimental scenario where you detect one of these photons, then you know definitely that there is a photon here, and one terms this as the heralded source of single photons. So when many people do experiments with single photons, essentially this is the source which is used. By the way, for people who work at telecom wavelengths, they use a third order nonlinearity. The OPA is replaced by the optical fiber nonlinearities, which are described in terms of the third order susceptibilities, but they have similar arrangement to produce correlated photons. All right. So now suppose we want to produce a state which is quantum mechanical. You can start from a classical like state, and by adding a photon to it, you produce a quantum mechanical state. So how you can do photon addition is illustrated here. So what you do, one of these beams, let's say you bring this beam in a coherent state. So this is a coherent beam of light, and you do the same procedure. You detect a photon here. So once you have detected the photon here, then what will happen, that out of the pair which is produced by this down converter, the other photon will be added to this beam of light. And that's how you would produce a state on which you have added a photon. Now this procedure virtually can be applied for any type of the input state. You can replace this input state by any other state and do this process, then you would have the photon added state by the process of heralding. Okay. So let me now explain how you do the process of photon subtraction. For this purpose, we can use a beam splitter, and let's imagine that we do the following. We come in with this input state psi, and on the other side we have the vacuum entering the beam splitter, and let's assume that the reflectivity of the beam splitter is very small. So let's see what happens in that case. This is the beam splitter transformation. Theta is connected to the reflectivity of the beam splitter, and if we assume that the reflectivity is small, then we can expand this out and you get this as the combined state on the other side. And now if on this side you detect a photon, so if you detect a photon on this side, then the state of the light on this side would be A acting on psi, and therefore you have produced an output state here which is such that you have subtracted a photon from the input state. So this is now a standard procedure for producing a state from which you have subtracted a photon. Now, so this procedure has been applied in the lab to very large number of states, and one has produced photon added coherent states, thermal states, photon added squeezed states, and so-called kitten states or cat states, states with entanglement holes, and so on. And in the context, if you start with an entangled state and you play around with the technique of photon addition and or subtraction, then you can increase the amount of entanglement in the state, and I am going to demonstrate some of this to you. Okay, so let me first give an example which has attracted a lot of attention. So let's suppose that we start with the initial state which is a single mode squeezed vacuum state. So this is the single mode squeezed vacuum state, and one knows that this state is Gaussian because the Wigner function for this state has this Gaussian form where alpha tilde is obtained from the original variable by this transformation. Now we add we add or subtract a single photon from this squeezed vacuum state. For the case of squeezed vacuum state, it turns out that addition of the single photon or the subtraction of a single photon is the same thing. And the new state is non-Gaussian. So this is the Wigner function for the new state, which is non-Gaussian, and this Wigner function can become negative. So once you add a photon or subtract a photon to a squeezed vacuum state, you get a negative Wigner function, and the state also has other non-classical properties. For example, if you look at the parameter which characterizes the photon statistics for such a field, the photon statistics parameter Q defined in this way turns out to be negative. So that means once you have added or subtracted a photon to a squeezed vacuum state, the statistics becomes sub-Poissonian. When this parameter becomes negative, it's the signature of sub-Poissonian statistics. On the other hand, the original state, the squeezed vacuum state, is known to be highly super-Poissonian, and in fact the corresponding parameter is given by this expression. So by addition or subtraction, you have changed the field from super-Poissonian to sub-Poissonian, and sub-Poissonian nature is a signature of highly non-classical nature of the field. Okay, so this is how the Wigner function for this subtracted squeezed state looks like, and at the origin it is strongly negative. Now it also turns out that if you look at the standard cat state, which is a superposition of two coherent states, and for small values of alpha, that also turns out to have the same structure. So the experimentalist adopted this procedure for producing Schrodinger cat states. Okay, so let me now point out a very simple application of photon addition and subtraction, and that is for the process which is known as the noiseless amplification. So if you look at an optical amplifier, what an optical amplifier does, that it transforms the input field A into the output field B, and if you are doing it classically, then that's all you have, B equal to G times A, where G is the gain of the amplifier. But quantum mechanically, in order to preserve the commutation relations, you need to have this quantum noise term, and this quantum noise term adds noise photons, and it's known that all optical amplifiers are deteriorated by the addition of these quantum noise photons. And so for many years, people had been thinking of possible methods that one can have amplification without the addition of quantum noise. And it turns out that photon addition and subtraction could be one possible way of doing noiseless amplification. And this again was pioneered by Bellini. So we now look at addition of photon followed by subtraction. All right. So the input state is going to be transformed into this state. You add a photon and then you subtract a photon. So now let's think of an input field with this as the state. So you have this unwarranted vacuum component in the input state. And the interesting part of this state is the one photon component. And so if you want to do amplification, you would like to amplify the useful part, which is this part. All right. So how do you get this complication? Generally, if you have a single photon which is going through a lossy medium, and losses in practice cannot be avoided, then you get this kind of structure for the state. So now on this state, if we do the photon addition followed by subtraction, you can see that this gets transformed into this. And what happens that you don't change this part, the vacuum part, but the signal part, the useful part, you amplify this with a factor 2. So you can say that the gain of this amplifier is a factor 2, which is a fairly large gain, and you do not add any kind of noise in this process. So you have a noiseless amplification, obtained by photon addition and subtraction. So this is a beautiful application of this idea of photon addition and subtraction. Okay, so let me now describe to you application of some of these ideas in the context of an entangled source of light. And a very common entanglement resource is the two-mode squeezed vacuum. Just a comment that the single mode squeezed vacuum people generally do by using optical cavities, whereas the two-mode squeezed vacuum is generated essentially in free space. So this is a common resource of entanglement. It's a two-mode squeezed vacuum, and again the same nonlinear crystal is going to produce this two-mode squeezed vacuum, provided you can get to this, you can make the parameter R reasonably large, and most groups have been limited to an R parameter which is like 3 to 4. So this parameter for this state characterizes both the squeezing properties of this state. So the squeezing is given by this factor, and so if R is non-zero, this term is negative, which is a signature of squeezing. The entanglement in this state is also characterized by the same parameter R. So if you look at the log negativity which is associated with this state, this is the expression for the log negativity. And in the limit of very large R, this state tends to go to the original EPR state, the state that Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen wrote in their original 1935 paper. So this is again a Gaussian resource because the Wigner function for this state is Gaussian. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this resource by allowing the possibility of photon addition or photon subtraction. So supposing on this entangled resource we want to carry out a photon subtraction. So here is the scheme. On this idler beam you want to take a photon out, and as I pointed out earlier that we bring a beam splitter with a small reflectivity, vacuum is entering from this port, single photon detector here, and with a small reflectivity. There is a technical complication here because these are not really the single photon detectors, they are the avalanche photodiodes. So if you say that the reflectivity of this beam splitter is small, the probability of finding more than one photon on this side is negligible. And so they essentially work in that case like single photon detectors. So you subtract from this one photon out, and the output state in that case would be this. This is the original input entangled state, you subtract one photon out. Now this state becomes non-Gaussian. For example, if you look at the quadrature distribution for this state, so you look at the quadrature for the mode A, the quadrature for the mode B, which are defined this way, then the quadrature distribution has this non-Gaussian character. Look at the structure of the exponential. Here is the entanglement term. In addition, you have this parameter which depends on the quadrature of A and the quadrature of B, and eta depends on how much squeezing you have, and phi actually is related, phi is the phase of this, which is related to the direction of the squeezing ellipse. So depending on this parameter, whether you choose it to be real or imaginary, you have different types of states. In particular, if you choose eta to be purely imaginary, then you find that this state has a vortex structure. If it were a two-particle state, supposing if you were to imagine this to be a state of two bosons, two massive bosons, then this is a state which carries an orbital angular momentum. So when you make a choice, eta to be imaginary, in that case you get this vortex structure in the mod square of the quadrature distribution, and the phase of psi jumps in this manner. For the case when eta is real, you have a different structure for the intensity distribution. We can also look at the amount of entanglement in this state and compare with the amount of entanglement in the squeezed vacuum. And what we find, if you characterize the entanglement in terms of log negativity parameter, so remember we are dealing with continuous variables, and for continuous variables log negativity and non-Gaussian systems, log negativity seems to be the only parameter which is available. So we look at the ratio of this log negativity parameter for the original Gaussian entangled state and for the present non-Gaussian state, and you find that as a function of this parameter R, that's how this ratio behaves. So there is an increased amount of entanglement in this non-Gaussian state. Okay, there is another idea which has been around, and people have done number of experiments, and this was originally proposed by Frentzen. And Frentzen said that if in down conversion we produce entangled photons, what happens if I look at the reverse process? And something very similar must happen in the reverse process. So here is our down conversion process. We have omega going to omega 1 plus omega 2. So you have this kind of a final state generated. One photon of frequency omega 1, one photon of the frequency omega 2. There is a spectral function which essentially contains the properties of the nonlinear crystal, but this delta function is important, which signifies the energy conservation, and this delta function gives you the entanglement between these two photons. So that's how a down converter works. So now if we look at the reverse of this, say we have some atomic system here, and we do a 2 photon absorption from this atomic system. So we come in with some input beam, and 2 photons are taken out from this input beam, and we get the output. Now in 80s, many of us had done calculations that if we have a coherent beam coming on a 2 photon absorber, whether the output beam is classical or non-classical. And the dynamical calculations have shown that in general the output beam is going to be non-classical. So Franzen looked at it a little more generally, and he said that the output state, apart from unnecessary factors there, will have this delta function here, and this delta function represents again the energy conservation, because the 2 photons have to be such that you hit one of the energy levels of the atomic system. So omega TPA represents the frequency of 2 photon absorption, and that must match the sum of the frequencies of the 2 photons. So if you see that these two things are very much parallel to each other, and therefore Franzen came up with the idea that by doing 2 photon absorption, it's a quantum mechanical process. By doing this 2 photon absorption, you would produce what he called an entanglement hole, So we produce states with entanglement holes, and Franzen of course was thinking in terms of the atomic absorbers, and we found very recently that we can use our method of photon subtraction to produce states with entanglement holes. So what we do again, we do this down conversion, and we produce entangled source of photons here, but now this time we take 1 photon from here and we take 1 photon from here. So we subtract 2 photons. Okay, so on this beam splitter we take 1 photon out of this, and on this beam splitter we take another photon out of this, and then in that case, and of course we have to do a coincidence here so that we know that the 2 photons have been taken out from the same pair. That is important, that the 2 photons have to be taken out from the same pair. So if you do this, then what you get in mathematical terms, of course, is very simple. This is our 2-mode squeezing operator. This is the original entangled state, and we take photon from one mode and the photon from another mode. So that is the output state. Now this output state has very interesting structure in terms of its quantum mechanical properties. First of all, you can write it like a superposition of 2 macroscopic states. You can write it as a cat state, because this you can introduce a new basis, A plus and A minus, and in terms of in this new basis, if you assume the phase of xi to be 0, then this you can write it in terms of product of 2 single mode squeezing operations. So S plus minus are 2 single mode squeezing operations. Then this 2 photon subtracted state can be written in this superposition form, which is like a cat state. So here you have a Gaussian state, a single mode Gaussian state, but then here you have a single mode non-Gaussian state. So you produce a cat state consisting of a Gaussian state and a non-Gaussian state. Okay. So how do these photon holes look like after you have subtracted the photons? So you can look at the probability of finding n pairs of photons. And for the Gaussian state, this curve, blue line, that's how this probability looks like. But now after you have subtracted one photon from each mode, then this is how it looks like. So, and this is the probability distribution for the pairs, and you are subtracting now a pair out. In terms of the quadratic distributions, so this is for the Gaussian state, the quadrature distribution, and this quadrature distribution is written in terms of the redefined quadratures. So originally you define the quadrature for A, quadrature for B, and then you can define a quadrature associated with A plus and A minus. So for the Gaussian state, x1 and x2 are the quadratures associated with A plus and A minus, and that's how the Gaussian state looks like. It's a product of two Gaussians, and the state with the entanglement hole has this structure. So it shows beautifully the existence of hole in the quadrature distribution. Okay, we can again look at the entanglement content of this state with the hole, and so what I have plotted here is the ratio of the log negativity parameter for the states obtained by subtraction to the entanglement parameter for the Gaussian state for the two cases when you subtract one photon out and when you subtract a pair out. So this one is for the case when you take one photon out, and this one is for the case when you take two photons out. And so this shows that that you do improve the entanglement content of the state if you do the photon subtraction. Okay, so all this applies for the case of photons. And now we could ask a question whether one could think of a similar procedure for the case of atoms and we produce entangled states for the case of atoms by this procedure of photon subtraction. Now for atoms, if you think in terms of atoms, photon subtraction is simply the spontaneous emission, because after all, if an atom is in the excited state and if it gives out a photon and you detect the photon, okay, and once you have detected the photon, then you know that the photon has been taken out of the atomic system. So one can use this idea of photon subtraction in the context of atoms, and let's think of this very simple scheme. So we have an atom with these two as the Zeeman levels, and this is the excited state of the atom. So if the atom emits a photon, it can go either to this state or to this state, but since these have the magnetic properties, these states, these are the magnetic quantum numbers, so the photons which are emitted are going to be polarized. And so in this process, one is going to produce entangled atom photon pairs. So what we say that the atom photon entanglement is intrinsic to the fundamental interaction, fundamental radiation matter interaction. So now we can think of appropriate detection of this photon. which is like taking the photon out of this system, or the excitation out of this system. So we can have a detector here measuring the photon, and we could put a polarizer on this detector to select a photon of a given polarization, and then we can project out different states. So in this case we would say that we can project a linear combination of these two states, and this we say that we can produce atomic coherence in the system where there was no coherence in the atom to start with. Okay, so if we have two atomic systems, and we take a photon from these systems, and we detect the photons here. So then what's going to happen in general, because we have atom photon entanglement, we have atom photon entanglement here, and we detect photons, then by this we are going to entangle these two systems. So we can produce entanglement between two systems which have never interacted with each other, or which can be even far from each other. And well, this procedure we have applied to generate a whole class of entangled states. For example, GHG states, which are three particle states, where all three particles are in one state or the other state, can be produced by this process of photons subtraction. Okay, let me skip this. So one application I like to describe to you of these subtracted non-Gaussian states is in the context of continuous variable teleportation. So what is continuous variable teleportation scheme? So we send an EPR pair to Alice and Bob. Alice has her own state A prime, and Bob has some input state. No, Bob has no input state except that he has this pair, one of the photons from this pair. Then Alice performs a homodyne measurement. So this is the homodyne scheme for Alice, and after performing the homodyne measurement, the result of measurement, which is some mu, which is like a homodyne measurement is like measuring the quadrature. So this result is transmitted classically to Bob. And Bob then does all kind of linear displacements of the result which is transmitted by Alice, and try to reconstruct, try to find out what becomes the state of this system B, and this should be identical to the state of A prime. So that is the idea for the continuous variable teleportation. And how does it work? Mathematically, so we introduce mathematically these objects called characteristic functions for different states, which are defined this way. Then you have the characteristic function associated with the input state that Alice already has. This is the characteristic function for the EPR pair, and then the output, the characteristic function on the Bob side, would be related to the characteristic function of the state that Alice had, and the characteristic function associated with the EPR pair. And once you have this characteristic function, by Fourier transform you can find out the Wigner function and then the full density matrix. For the Gaussian entangled state, that is the two-mode squeezed vacuum, this characteristic function has this structure, and so you can see that in the limit r goes to infinity, chi out becomes identical to chi in. And in this case, one would say that we have perfect teleportation of the continuous variable state. But we need an entangled resource which is highly squeezed. So that's when the teleportation is perfect. But as I said in the beginning, that even to produce r equal to 3 or 4, it's only one or two labs in the world which have produced r equal to 3 or 4. Particularly De Martini's lab in Rome, and now Mataloni runs the lab. So that lab has produced r about 4. So one would like to have an improved resource for entanglement, and maybe these photon subtracted resource is better. So we have examined the teleportation of these cat states which I mentioned in the beginning. This is the standard form in which the cat states are written, and these have the negative Wigner function and so on. And one of the ways that one would like to do teleportation is to make sure that this part is retained in the teleportation process. Now a very nice experiment was done. So this one was done about 2 years ago, and this is the first experiment reported on the teleportation of the cat states. Prior to this, in the continuous variables, people had basically done the teleportation of the coherent states. So in this experiment, this is the input cat state, the Wigner function for the input cat state, and the photon number distribution associated with the input cat state, and this is the output cat state, the Wigner function of the output teleported state, and you can see that there is a significant loss of this negativity of the Wigner function, and these experimentalists say that this significant loss is essentially because of a very moderate value of the squeezing parameter that they had in the experiment. So let's see how it would work if we replace this Gaussian resource with a state with entanglement hole, and the two quantities of concern are the fidelity, and that's how the fidelity would be defined. So in terms of the characteristic function, you can calculate the fidelity, and the negativity of the Wigner function then you can calculate using the standard Fourier transform. Okay. Which one? I explained in the beginning that you take the Gaussian state and you subtract a pair out, okay, and then it's like making a hole in the state, because a pair is missing, okay, and an entangled pair is missing. I mean, the two photons in the pair are entangled. All right. So the fidelity of teleportation, and this look at this black curve, and the scale is on this size, and what it shows that for moderate values of r, there is significant improvement in the fidelity of teleportation. if you use the state with entanglement hole. And you also find that the negativity of the Wigner function improves. So this is the original negativity of the Wigner function for the cat state, and this is the negativity which you would get if you had used the Gaussian resource, and this is the negativity which you would get if you had used the non-Gaussian resource with the same value of R. So these two are for a given value of the squeezing parameter R. And if you compare these two curves, you recover here negativity, much more of the negativity of the Wigner function. So the teleportation definitely works much better if you use the non-Gaussian state to do the teleportation. Okay. So final 10 minutes or so, let me spend on a somewhat different topic, but related topic. And so what I want to discuss here, the possibility of producing coherence from incoherence by the procedure of photon subtraction. So we looked at a state which is highly incoherent, and the highly incoherent state would be like a thermal state of two modes. So you have two modes of the radiation field, and here is the thermal state. And this thermal state has no coherence. The coherence parameter is defined in this manner, and this term obviously is 0. So it's a highly incoherent source. And how are we going to do the photon subtraction from this? So photon subtraction is done by the detection process. So you can have sources here. I mean, this general diagram. So you can have some sources here, and you detect certain number of photons on these different detectors, and this way you would have subtracted those many photons from the source. So if we take this state, this source, and we subtract n photons from this. The only thing is that when we subtract a photon, we have here two sources basically. So we don't know from which source the photon has been subtracted, because we have two sources, and the light is given out these sources. We have two detectors, so each detector can get a photon from either source. So in the photon subtraction, we then have to use this. So after n subtraction, that becomes the state. Pardon me? Yeah. Yeah, in principle you can put a phase also. I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible. You are absolutely right. No, because the detectors are fixed. Okay. So phases, I mean, when we do the full calculation, we have put in the phases, okay. But I'm just trying to keep it very simple. So then, if you ask the question that after different subtractions, what happens to this coherence parameter, and you get a result like this, n over n plus 2, and depending on how many you subtract, you get different values. So when you did not subtract, this quantity was 0, and after subtraction 1, it became 1/3, and for other values of n, then this number increases, and eventually after large number of subtractions this will approach unity. So in that case an incoherent source becomes coherent. Okay. You can look at some other sources. You can think of two coherent sources which has relative random phase. So because of the relative random phase, that means they are incoherent with respect to each other but coherent by themselves. So again in this case the mu would have been 0, but if you start doing subtraction then you get this kind of result, which again shows that the sources which were incoherent with respect to each other would start becoming coherent when you start subtracting photons. Photon addition on this incoherent source can produce entanglement, and so if you look at the log negativity parameter associated with this, so you find that you produce I mean this has negative, the partial transpose of this would have negative eigenvalues, so leading to this value of log negative for this average number of photons in the thermal source. So finally one could also ask the question whether photon subtraction on such a state, such an incoherent state, can produce entanglement, and this gets little tricky. So this is the completely incoherent source, you do photon subtraction. Now for this state the log negativity parameter is 0. So essentially when you subtract photons on an incoherent state you would not produce any entanglement. Okay, so let us analyze it slightly differently. Let us rewrite this as the vacuum part plus the rest. And if you look at the vacuum part, for optical measurements, unless you design a special class of measurement to look at the vacuum part, the vacuum part is going to be unobservable, because optically you are measuring correlation functions, and these correlation functions are all normally ordered correlation functions. So this part is not going to contribute to the normally ordered correlation functions, which is what you measure for in optics all the time. And so only this part is going to contribute to the measurements, and so we started checking whether this last part has negative, I mean the partial transpose of this has negative eigenvalues, and it turns out that this last part does have negative eigenvalues. The partial transpose has certain negative eigenvalues, and how much negativity you have depends on the mean number of photons. So I wanted to mention this because this is something which we are trying to understand now and trying to think of how one would detect, do a measurement of this negativity. But I might just make a remark that this kind of situation is somewhat similar to what one encounters in NMR, and because in NMR you have a large part which you don't care what it is, but there is a very interesting part, and the way experimentalists do experiments, they basically look at this part in their experimental setups. So yeah, so So anyway, this part we are really trying to understand, but it just turns out that even in this case, there is a relevant part of the density matrix which is relevant for the experiment. It does show all the properties like entanglement and so on. Whereas the complete density matrix has no entanglement. Okay, so so let me conclude that what I have showed that we can generate a whole class of non-Gaussian states by photon subtraction and addition, and such non-Gaussian states have number of very interesting non-classical properties which are not there in the original state. Generally they have higher entanglement than in the Gaussian states. I indicate the possibility of noiseless amplification.
We have a little bit of time for questions, not very much.
Control over the detector about the phase of A plus B.
So actually what happens that where I put the detector, that brings a phase factor. Okay, so the kind of eventual states that I am going to produce, they depend on the phases where I place the detector.
So you will tune the detector to.
And I can change those phases, and there is a lot of freedom there. And this lot of freedom, in fact, helps me to create different kind of states. To give you an example, quantum information community usually would write a W state, for a multi-particle system with no phases anywhere, completely symmetric W state. But we can have a scenario where we have a W state with phases in various places, and these phases we can control where we place the detector. So we can produce by this technique a much more general class of states by just using those phases.
Simon?
I have several questions, probably I will state three of them. One is in the continuous variable teleportation case, you somehow imply that R equal to 4 is a very small thing.
No, I don't imply R equal to 4 is a small thing. I said R equal to 4 is a modest value, but for the laboratory purpose, it's already a very large value.
No, let's take, see, R equal to 4 is e power minus 2R is at least, less than 1 over 1000. And it further occurs in the exponent. So, I think it's like, how will you see the difference between R equal to 4 and R equal to infinity? Because
no, in terms of the number of photons, if you talk, number of photons goes as sine hyperbolic square R, and so photons grow asymptotically very large, but sine hyperbolic square of 3 or 4 is not such a large number.
No, but it comes in the final expression that you showed. It's e power minus alpha mod square into e power minus 2r. So e power minus 2r came in the exponent.
Yeah, that is, all these things come.
It's a factor of 1000 in the exponent.
E to the
and
power.
I don't think there is any experiment which has reached that state. Anyway, the second.
No, R equal to 4 is practical. People have reached.
Yeah,
R
but so that's
no. So.
And the second question is, you had this 3-particle entanglement.
Yeah.
Did you find the fidelity? Have you computed the fidelity and yield?
What is yield? That's a new thing for me.
No. You starting from it, you do it by filtering. First of all, I think your statement that you have noiseless amplification, I think it has to be qualified.
It's heralded.
No. The usual amplification is followed by noise.
Yeah.
That's like a coherent state alpha can be taken to a coherent state 0.2 times alpha without any noise. But if you try to take a coherent state alpha to 1.5 times alpha for every coherent state, you necessarily have to do noise. Okay, I mean, this is where you started off with.
Right.
But then you said you have noiseless amplification, but they are all in a kind of very, very restricted sense. Only for a very special state it will produce amplification, but many other states, for most states, it will not produce amplification, is it not?
This is absolutely right, but the point is that currently single photon states are the ones which are of great interest, and one is always arguing that the single photon state, because of the losses which cannot be avoided, so when you try to transmit single photon states, they pick up this unwarranted vacuum component, and therefore the net signal compared to the vacuum component goes down, and we want to amplify this part of the signal. And people like Bellini has done using this method, but there are other groups who have used other methods, and this I think is a remarkable progress as far as I am concerned. But at the same time, what you say also say is true, that I need to qualify this, that this is designed for certain types of states.
And the last question with your last slide,
Yeah.
where you have left out the cross term matrix elements between 0, 0.
No, that I have kept. That I have
No, I
kept.
think at least in this slide you didn't show.
Maybe I made a mistake, but
No, but,
But I
in
think
the
I just-
argument also, in your argument also, I think that did not come out. I
No, no,
can you go, but I think it's,
no, the cross terms have been included. In fact, cross terms are important. So only thing which is
the
not
last slide.
Yeah,
And
very
the-
last.
and
So
just
I have only
before
dropped.
conclusion.
No, I'm coming to that. The only thing that I have dropped is just 0, 0. Okay. There was. So
Yeah.
every-
Now, if you just to drop 0, 0 and everything else, you cannot calculate non-negativity for it because that object itself is not positive.
which one?
I mean, if you have removed, if you see if the cross terms between the ground state and the other terms are in your second term, then there you cannot calculate non-negativity because that part is not a positive part. I mean, if you just remove this ground state component alone from your density operator, the remaining part is not a positive operator.
That in some sense is true, but we have been more motivated by the NMR analogy because I think there also you have exactly a similar situation.
Pseudo pure state kind of a thing.
That's right. So we have exactly similar situation, and I said that we have just found this and we are trying to learn more.
But I'm
This particular
intrigued. I think
case-
the rest may not be positive. In fact, I mean, to provoke, I will say the rest will not be positive.
No, I'd like to discuss more with you later.
Yes.
This issue.
Please,
because this is something-
can you take this offline, please, because we're already speaking up, getting behind schedule. I have one very short question.
Please.
When you teleport continuous variables, how many bits of classical communication do you need?
How many bits of?
Classical communication.
I don't know how to answer that question because I thought they do a homodyne measurement and they transmit that information.
So you have this classical channel. What goes on this classical channel?
Which one?
The classical channel that is used
Yeah.
in the teleportation of a continuous variable. What is transmitted on that classical channel? That's my question.
So the homodyne measurement, it measures the quadrature and the value of that quadrature is being transmitted.
Yeah, but that value is what? So what number?
Yeah.
It's a real number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I forgot to say. Yeah, good. Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, quadrature is real.
All right. So you need an infinite number of bits of communication.
Essentially, you need large numbers to be transmitted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. There was a question. It has to be really brief. Really, we should be finished in 1 minute.
So in the teleportation scheme, you have used non-Gaussian input states, right?
Yeah.
And the resource is also non-Gaussian.
Right.
So how do you guarantee that the fidelity which you get
Yeah.
is really quantum? See, in the original continuous variable teleportation scheme, people used coherent states as inputs, right? In this, with
Yeah, for coherent states, people have mathematically proved that it's like 2/3 or something.
yes.
You know, Capes had
Yes,
proved it
yes.
mathematically for the teleportation of coherent states.
Kimball and
Yeah.
Brownstein, yes.
But for other states, there are no available proofs. But the fact that that I retain highly non-classical nature of my state when I transport it, it must be quantum by implication. If it were classical, then it would not be able to retain that non-classical character. But one needs a formal proof. But unfortunately, there are no formal proofs.
Okay, let's thank the speaker again.
My pleasure.
And it's my pleasure to offer you this
Oh,
of appreciation.
well, thanks very much.